You pick up your phone at a red light, not because you need to, just because the seconds feel unbearable. 4 seconds of nothing, and already your thumb is moving toward the screen, hunting for something, anything to fill the gap. You call this boredom, but the real answer is far stranger. Your ancestors rarely felt this way, and when they didn't reach for a screen. They reached for something that would end up building the entire world you live in now. For most of human history, there was no rush to fill silence. No app promised to save you from your own mind. Just open sky, open time, and a brain with nowhere urgent to be. So what did that brain do with all those empty hours? Start with a number that sounds impossible. In 1966, an anthropologist named Marshall Sahlins stood in front of a room of scholars and said something that broke every assumption about prehistoric life. He called hunter-gatherers the original affluent society, not because they had more stuff, because they had more time. Sahlins pulled together data from groups like the hoansi of the Kalahari Desert and the Hadza of Tanzania and found something startling. These communities often worked only 15 to 20 hours a week to meet their basic needs. 15 hours. Compare that to your own week. Unclaimed. Unscheduled. The rest of their time? You might assume they spent those hours staring blankly, waiting for the next hunt. That assumption is wrong. Decades later, an anthropologist named James Suzman went and lived among the Juwanzi to see for himself. He didn't find people slumped in silence. He found people telling stories, repairing tools, teaching children by letting them watch, arguing over honey, making music with nothing but a voice and a rhythm tapped on a knee. Suzman described their culture as one built around immediate reward rather than constant labor. Their economy didn't demand more than survival required, so their minds were left free to wander into everything else that makes a life feel worth living. This is where the real story begins. Here's the plain truth hiding underneath the anthropology. Boredom as you experience it is a fairly modern invention. Not because ancient humans never had empty moments. They had plenty, but their brains didn't panic in those moments the way yours does, because nothing had trained their attention to expect constant stimulation. There was no algorithm teaching their minds to crave a hit of novelty every few seconds. Empty time wasn't a problem waiting to be solved. It was simply time. So what happened during that so-called empty time? Everything, actually. An anthropologist named Frank Marlowe spent years studying the Hadza, one of the last groups on Earth still living by hunting and gathering. He tracked how they spent their daylight hours, task by task, almost minute by minute. What he found looked less like idleness and more like a hidden curriculum running quietly in the background of daily life. Children learned to track animals by watching adults, not through structured lessons. Adults practiced tool-making not out of urgent necessity, but because a slow afternoon gave them the chance to improve a spear, sharpen an edge, or perfect the balance of an arrow. Groups sat together for hours, trading stories that carried survival knowledge disguised as entertainment. Which plants were poisonous, where water hid during the dry season, who could be trusted and who couldn't. Story became the original data storage system, passed mouth to mouth, generation to generation, wrapped in just enough drama to make it stick. Think about that for a second. What looked like nothing was actually the mechanism holding the entire society together. And here's where it gets stranger. Some researchers argue that unstructured time wasn't just filling gaps between chores. It was the engine behind human creativity itself. The cave paintings found in places like Lascaux and Chauvet weren't created in moments of crisis or survival panic. They were created during long stretches of downtime, when someone had the mental space to notice a blank wall, imagine an animal moving across it, and spend hours bringing that image to life with pigment and patience. Music, body ornamentation, symbolic burial, elaborate tool design. None of it emerged from constant, frantic labor. It emerged from minds that finally had room to drift. Boredom, in other words, might be the price your brain pays for having too much to do. And having too much to do might be a distinctly modern problem. Here's the twist your instincts probably didn't see coming. The agricultural revolution, the moment humans shifted from foraging to farming, is often taught in school as pure progress. More food, more stability, more civilization. But researchers examining skeletal remains and reconstructed time use patterns have found something far less comfortable. Farming often meant more work, not less. Longer hours, tied tightly to the rhythm of planting and harvest, with far less room for open, unscheduled time. The original affluent society Sahlins described didn't simply get replaced by something better in every sense. In some very real ways, it got replaced by something busier, which means the trade humanity made thousands of years ago still echoes directly into your Tuesday afternoon. Fast forward to now. Your calendar has color-coded blocks. Your phone tracks your screen time like a parole officer keeping tabs on a curfew. And the moment a gap opens up, 5 unscheduled minutes, something in you recoils. Psychologist Timothy Wilson and his colleagues studied this exact discomfort in a now famous set of experiments. They left people alone in a room with nothing to do but think. No phone, no book. Just their own mind for 15 minutes. Many participants found it so unpleasant that, given the choice, they opted to give themselves a mild electric shock instead. Nothing to do felt worse than something painful. Your ancestors would not have understood that reaction. Not because they were tougher, because their relationship with empty time was never poisoned by comparison, by notifications, by the quiet sense that every idle second was a second wasted. So what actually changed? Partly it's the sheer volume of stimulation now available at every moment. A brain that evolved around campfires, slow rhythms, and long stretches of unstructured time now lives inside a stream of infinite content, engineered specifically to be more interesting than your own thoughts. Every scroll delivers a tiny reward. Every notification, a tiny promise. Against that kind of competition, silence doesn't stand much of a chance. Not because silence changed, because everything surrounding it did. But here's the part worth sitting with. That ancient capacity, the one that let a bored afternoon turn into a cave painting, a sharpened tool, the story that saved someone's life the following winter, hasn't disappeared. It's still in you. It just rarely gets the conditions it needs to switch on. Some of the most interesting ideas you've ever had probably didn't arrive while you were working. They arrived while you were doing something close to nothing. In the shower, on a long walk, staring out a train window with your phone finally, accidentally, out of reach. That's not a coincidence. Neuroscientists studying what's known as the brain's default mode network, the system that quietly activates whenever you're not locked onto a specific task, have found that this doing nothing state is exactly when the brain connects ideas that focused attention tends to keep separate. Boredom, in the right dose, isn't empty at all. It's incubating something. Your ancestors didn't have a name for this. They didn't need one. It was simply how a normal afternoon worked, day after day, for nearly the entire span of human existence. You, on the other hand, have to fight for it. There's a reason the most restless people in history so often describe their best ideas arriving in the shower, on a walk, or staring blankly out a window. It's the same reason a Hadza elder could sit for an hour doing seemingly nothing and later produce a story, a tool, or a piece of advice that shaped an entire group's survival. The mind was never designed to be constantly fed. It was designed to occasionally go quiet, and in that quiet, to build something. So the next time 4 seconds of silence at a red light feels unbearable, consider what that discomfort is actually telling you. Not that something is wrong with you, that you're carrying a very old mind through a very new environment, one that was never designed for constant noise. Your ancestors filled their open hours with stories, tools, art, and the occasional idea that changed everything that came after them. You still have that same mind. It's just buried under a few thousand extra notifications. You picked up your phone at a red light. Put it down instead. Let the 4 seconds stretch. That silence was never empty. It's the oldest, strangest tool your species has ever had.